it's good to have you this morning. And this program is, of course, about Delta food. And that's a subject that's close to my heart since I grew up there, and close to Susan Puckett's because she wrote the book on it. But before we get started, let me recognize some people. Darren Sinevsky was the head of the design class that designed this magazine. And it's why the magazine looks so good. Dr. Al Steele and Mickey Harris also supervise photographers, videographers, multimedia. And you'll see wonderful stuff in the book for that reason, and then you'll see it also in the iPad version that's coming later. You'll notice, those of you who picked up magazines, you'll notice there's two different covers. We're playing with things here and trying to figure them out. One of them has Land of Plenty on it. The other one has Deeper South. And y'all can tell us which one you like. I think that's the one major difference between the two magazines is the cover. We were going to change some more pages, but we ran into something called a budget. And the printer wanted to charge us a lot more money. Let me recognize some other people. Dr. John Salmons from the Honors College is here. Thank you. The Honors College is one of the sponsors of this class. It's taught in the Honors College. And it's composed of Honors College students. And if we don't get enough Honors College students in, we slip some others in as long as their grade point averages are astronomical. Is that right, John? I want to recognize Ed Meek, whose name is on the Meek School, and without whose support this could not have been possible. Dean Will Norton and Charlie Mitchell are probably here somewhere and probably hiding from you. And Bill Luckett from Clarksdale has always cooperated with these magazines and helped us in any number of ways in terms of opening doors and making himself available. And this year he was actually a host because not only did he host us at an event in Clarksdale, but he also rented us rooms at a good price above Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale. So if you take this course, you too can sleep above Ground Zero, which may be a problem at certain hours. What this is all about is each year we teach something called depth reporting, 577. And we take students to the Mississippi Delta, for the most part, where they report in-depth magazine stories. And they shoot and they videotape and they do all sorts of things. Everything you can imagine doing as a journalist, they do. And we stress in-depth reporting and really, really good writing. We spend a lot of time talking about writing. This year we went all over the Delta writing about food. I co-taught this course this year with Susan Puckett. It was her idea. She's an Atlanta author, a former food editor for the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. She came up with the idea because she wrote the book, and I'm going to let her tell you about the book. It's called Eat, Drink, Delta. And it really provided a good basis for a lot of our reporting.
Thank you. And it's so great to be here, and I'm so excited with the results of this work. And I'll just tell you a few words about Eat, Drink, Delta, A Hungry Traveler's Journey Through the Soul of the South. I'm from Jackson originally, and my introduction to the Delta actually was when I was a student here at Ole Miss, and my boyfriend took me home to the Delta for the first time, and I felt like I had driven off the face of the moon or something. The landscape kind of blew me away, and I had he took me out to dinner at a place called Lusco's, which totally blew me away, not just because I had never had pompano before, and the food was great, but there were these strange booths, and you had to ring a buzzer, and it was, the main thing I remember about it and that stuck with me is the fact that it did stick with me for so long. And that, to me, is what distinguishes Delta dining beyond anything else, is that when you dine in the Delta, you're not just getting a meal. You are getting a piece of these people's lives, of their culture, and of their history. And I wanted to do this book to try, actually it was my own exploration and curiosity about this very strange and complicated place. And I took that, you know, the old cliche that the Mississippi Delta begins in the lobby of the Peabody Hotel in Memphis and ends on Catfish Row in Vicksburg. And I tried to tell the story by going from cafe to restaurant to just focusing on the food. And it was really a life-changing experience. And it was just such, I can't tell you what a thrill it was for me to be able to continue the journey with these amazing students who just found a lot more layers than I saw the first time around, and it's what keeps me coming back time and again. And with that, I think let's hear from them.
Okay. Before I start grilling these poor souls, there was one other person I wanted to thank. I think I saw his face, John T. Edge. Are you here, John T.? John T. was, you've seen his name in the New York Times on food stories, and he's with Southern Foodways and with the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. And I sat down with him very early before we started the course and got some good guidance from him, and he was a great help to our students as they did their reporting. So let's go to the students themselves, because I want them to tell us what they did and how they did it. I'm going to start with Neil since he's the most nervous. You had never taken a journalism course in your life, right? You're what kind of major?
I do Southern Studies, which means I'm constantly starting over on new fields.
So what was it like going into little towns you'd never been to without any journalism experience except what you get from the course, and being asked to do tough reporting on subjects like obesity?
Well, for one thing, I believed you that said that you're a talker, it'll be okay. The Delta people, they'll talk, they'll help you out. But one thing that really helped me was before the spring break trip, I went with Lauren McMillan on some of her reports to the Delta, and she's really experienced, and I definitely observed her, watched a lot, and then I found out that just breaking the ice isn't too difficult when you're talking about foods, and I was lucky to have the topic that kind of covered everything, so I piggybacked a lot off my writers.
Now you went to the White Front Cafe in Rosedale. Talk about sitting there eating tamales in the White Front and trying to get these people to who are reluctant at first to talk to you and give you a really good story on the genesis of those hot tamales and how they do it.
Well, that's a great argument for spontaneity as a journalist, because it wasn't planned to go to Rosedale. It felt like we might get summer out without even going. Susan Puckett was like, we need to go, and it's going to be really good. You're right. Okay. And when we got there, you could tell this lady was really shy, and she was not ready to be interrogated by any means. But so we ordered tamales, and this nice lady turned to us and was like, "You're gonna want more than 3." And she was right, because it was really good, and I ate the 3 really fast. So I guess when you're barging down some food place, order a lot of food, so it takes a little time. But we just kept being polite and kept asking her questions about kind of her family, her history, her area, and with the help of her friend, because it's like a real community in the Delta, she really warmed up, and it was the best experience I had.
Great.
wondered if you had the challenge of two really broad topics, the Delta Italians and their impact on Delta food, and also where hospitality, what Delta hospitality really is. And I wondered if with both of those things you could just talk about how did you winnow it down to find the story angles that you want with, I mean, so many thousands of stories that you could have picked from.
Well, first I was kind of scared when I got assigned both hospitality and Italians because they're two huge stories, like she said, so broad. And so what I did was I really just focused on Italians first. Our spring break trip focused solely on Italians, went to all the Italian restaurants. And I just realized when I was picking angles that those places have left such a legacy in each one of their towns. Some of them don't even serve Italian food, but they're owned by Italian families. And when you think about food in Greenwood, what do you think of? Lusco's. When you think about food in Greenwood, Lusco's. When you think about Greenville, what do you think of? Doe's. So I really just kind of focused in on that, and I would go into these restaurants and find the one person that has made it all happen and has made it last in those restaurants. And my favorite person in Doe's, her name was Florence. She's 87. She was 87 when I interviewed her. She might be 88 now, but I just loved everything about her, how close she was to her customers, how she so nonchalantly said, "Oh, George Clooney sat at that table once, and I served him, tamales, and I just acted like it was no big deal, and my mouth is on the floor because who doesn't love George Clooney?" And so with each story or each restaurant for that story, I broke it up into sections, and I really just focused on who's made that restaurant possible and what kind of legacy they left behind. And it kind of goes to show how the Italians in general have just left this huge legacy. They worked from the very, very bottom. They came over as they immigrated here and worked just to pick Delta cotton, and they have grown to be some of the biggest restaurateurs in the South, I think. Doe's has won a James Beard Award, which is huge. And so that's really what I wanted to show, especially because we've covered some of these restaurants in previous depth reports. So that was nerve-wracking too, kind of picking my own angle. But that's what I did. And then for hospitality, I completely finished Italians, got it out of my mind. I handed it to Bill and said, you edit it, I'm done for now. And kind of just immerse myself again in hospitality, which I don't know if I have to go on about that. I don't want to take too much time. But that's kind of what I did. You kind of have to immerse yourself in that story at that time and just kind of dig really deep, and it comes out in the end.
Good.
Philip Waller wrote about a new food trend, probably unearthed by John T. Edge some time ago in a New York Times story. What on earth are Kool-Aid pickles, and how did you meet the guy that made them, and why would anybody eat those things?
I'll tell you what, Kool-Aid pickles are something, you laugh, it sounds like a really ridiculous thing, Kool-Aid and pickles together, but basically what they are is you take Mount Olive kosher dills and you pour a packet of Kool-Aid into the brine and mix in a little bit of sugar, let them marinate for a week, and then you have this unearthly colored pickle that's taken on this sweet, sour, briny pickle taste. And, some people just love it, and some people really, really hate it. I was definitely one of the people that hated it. And the nice thing, though, about the Delta is there's so many different food cultures, food traditions that go on, and they start in very odd ways. What I got from my report, and also kind of what you see, is that people like these different combinations of flavor. So what they do is they say, well, I like this and I like this. If I put them together, maybe they'll taste good. And that's exactly what happened with Kool-Aid pickle. John T. Edge, I guess, he's written, a seminal piece on Kool-Aid pickles, if you can call it that. People before that had just, they were around, but people didn't really know about them outside of the Delta. And it's kind of a hard act to follow, but I tried to do my best. The hardest part was finding someone who made them. They're all over the place, but who actually makes them? But the nice thing about the Delta is the people. You walk around the Delta, you talk to people, and you find out these connections. So, you know, hey, you go to the first interview, do you know anyone that sells Kool-Aid pickles? Well, actually, my cousin does, or my brother does, or my sister does. Well, I think someone down the street does. And you walk down the street, and you literally find people that can answer your questions and help you out. And that's anything we did. So the person I found was actually the local chief of police now, and he was a detective at the time. You know, he was just walking along, and he rolled down his window of his patrol car and asked me what I was doing in that section of town. And he was like, well, I'm looking for Kool-Aid pickles. He's like, really? You know, I make them myself. I'm like, really? Would you mind talking to me? And he set up an interview that day. And it was such a cool experience just being able to meet someone on the street and go and talk to them and have a story from it.
And he actually invited you to his house,
He invited
right?
me to his house. You know, you see some of the pictures cycling through. I got to meet his children, his family, take some photos, you know, do the interview. It was a really great experience overall.
That's cool. Rachel, wanted to talk about your experience with the Fratesi family, and Rachel got a chance to take a focus story that had and kind of open up the lens on the agriculture story of the Delta. And could you talk about how visiting this prawn farm, what did that teach you about the state of agriculture in the Delta in general?
Yeah, so we went, Sarah Bracey came with me that day, Katie, Susan, and we went out to Leland, which is the Fratesi's farm, Lauren Farms, and they're actually farming prawns there, which are very similar to shrimp, but they're started in freshwater. Then they go into larger saltwater ponds. And they moved over to prawns after farming catfish, which obviously after row crops, that was the big thing in the Delta for a number of years. But, you know, that with foreign imports and farmers have had to find a way to move away from this crop, and the Fratesis were really the pioneers of this new aquaculture of prawns, and they're kind of leading the way for other farmers, working with Mississippi State University, who've been doing a lot of research, and they've got a pretty big setup over there, and they're providing a lot of the restaurants in the region. We went out to eat at Vince's in Leland, and they are cooking the Fratesi's prawns in a number of
About 6
fantastic
different
ways. Yeah,
Pond to table.
yes, yeah, literally straight down the road from the ponds on into dishes cooked by Will Galt. But prawns are something that we eat a lot in the UK where I'm from, and so it was really interesting to learn about this new aquaculture and kind of see hopefully what will be the future of that in the Delta.
Yeah. Well, before we leave you, I want to talk about another, you also wrote about another institution of the Delta. What is so special about those pies at the Crystal Grill?
My other story was about the Crystal Grill, which is a very well-known restaurant in Greenwood, and they make these coconut cream and chocolate pies, and you've got the base of the pie maybe 2 inches thick, and then you've got 3-4 inches of meringue sitting on top, and huge pies, and they're absolutely delicious. And they wouldn't actually tell me how they do it. This is a secret. They can't tell me. But I mean, you have to go and try them, and this is kind of what they're known for. They do a host of other stuff on their menu, just loads of food, but if you have time to go there, you've got to try the pies. That's what they're known for.
Good.
One of the stories in the magazine is The Little Town That Cared, and it's about Charleston and how the whole town got interested in losing weight and healthy eating. And Lauren McMillan wrote that story. And part of it was talking about how one particular man, Trincy Bannum, lost how much weight?
He lost about 43 pounds.
About 43 pounds. How much did he weigh?
He started at 340.
340 pounds, okay. And how did he lose it?
He walked, he lived in Oakland, which is 12 miles away from Charleston, and he would walk from Oakland to Charleston every day, working his way up to, I think, 13 miles, and that's really how he lost weight.
Every day. Wearing what?
He would wear heavy sweatpants, like a thick, heavy hoodie, and just every morning and every night he started doing that in like 85-degree heat.
And tell me about the Charleston Middle School, what it was like at the Charleston Middle School before they yanked the fryers out.
Well, I spoke with the vice principal and a few of the teachers at Charleston Middle School, and they said that in the mornings they could just tell it was going to be a bad day because as the kids were getting off of the school buses, they could smell syrup and sugar off of them, and they knew from that what they had for breakfast or what they didn't have for breakfast, and that really kind of triggered in their minds that they needed to make a change with the way that they were eating.
Good. Actually, before we leave that topic, I want to go back to Philip because now we're getting into talking about some of the downside of the diet and the Delta and food deserts and those problems. And you wrote about community gardens, which are quite a bit different from the community gardens in some of the hip urban places around the country. And could you elaborate on that?
Well, I guess what I would say about that is that in the Delta, we have this huge problem with poverty, a huge problem with people not eating properly and not being able to have access to healthy food. There's a lot of factors that contribute to that, but mostly what I would say from what I found in my own interviews and talking to people is there's not a lot of access to healthy food. In a small Delta town, it's hard to support a large grocery store or Walmart or something like that. You might have to travel several miles, maybe even up to 30 miles to find a store that sells something healthy to you. And when I'm saying healthy, I mean something that's not coming in a bag or is frozen or come out of a bottle that's sugary and high in saturated fat and sodium. It's hard even to find just a vegetable in some places in the Delta. And what some people have decided to do is that if these big companies are not going to come in and help support us and give us the food options that we need, we're going to have to grow it ourselves. The Delta has this old tradition of being a really rich place to grow things. We have a history of cotton, a history of soybeans, and all these other things that we grow, things that we can't eat. And they're trying to take that rich soil and put it to use, growing food that people can eat. And it's really great. You get this community involvement.
Can you talk about Ruthie? Yeah.
Ruthie Robinson, great lady. It comes down to these people have this spiritual connection to making sure people are eating healthy. Your body to her is a living temple, and you need to be providing it the best possible food. So they make it this kind of a spiritual journey to create food for them to consume. And they get everyone involved with it. They grow in church gardens, they grow them in backyards, they grow anywhere they can find a place to put down some crops. And, by eating these foods, they feel like they're helping themselves get out into a better place and reversing, sort of the tide of bad eating and poverty and things like that.
And they actually, some of them are descendants of sharecroppers, right?
Right, yeah. Right. And the sad thing is we have this history of agriculture in the Delta, but we've lost this connection with our agriculture. We used to have a huge percentage of our population in agriculture growing these crops on a daily basis, but then as machines came in, as it started becoming mechanized, fewer and fewer people actually started working on farms. And we kind of lost this art of growing simple foods. And, right now, the way our agricultural system is set up, it's really hard for someone like me to go out and start a garden that can provide enough food for my family because it's inefficient. It's hard to do. You don't have enough room to do it. But what they're really working on doing is reconnecting the people of the Delta to the land and to a way of producing food for the Delta. And that's really the key thing is making the food of the Delta come from the Delta and feed the people of the Delta that need it so much.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks a lot to just the entrepreneurial spirit of Deltans, which leads me to Aaron, who wrote about a very interesting collection of Delta entrepreneurs who have focused on the love of food here. And I wondered can you talk just about some of the characters and just what you found in that?
Well, I geared it towards my interests as well. So when I moved here last year, I thought, I'm a grad student. I laugh now. I think I have some time. Let me try and learn how to brew beer. And then I forgot about blue laws and interesting laws and how each state works. But I happened to find this beer supply place. And luckily I found out that they had just been open since October. And with how the laws have opened up since July, this business is just flourishing. They now have a beer garden. They have joggers come out every Wednesday. They have music. So it's becoming this kind of downtown revitalization. And then I heard from a professor about the farmer's market in town on Lamar and about this wonderful ice cream. And who doesn't like ice cream? So I went out and bought the ice cream. And then again, real deep reporting both times. I found him on Facebook. So then I had that information and was able to interview right in Clarksdale.
What are some of the flavors? And what's the name? Magnolia? Is it sweet?
Sweet Magnolia. Mm-hmm. And they have whiskey pecan. Last night I devoured mint chocolate. What else? The pistachio's really good. They do a banana cream, I think.
Mm-hmm. And he's a transplant, right?
He is. His wife is from the Delta. So after she finished her, I think, internship, she's a doctor, they came back to the Delta, and she's running, I think, a women's health clinic. So
interesting. Well, and before we leave you, I want you also did a story about Tunica and how the gaming industry has influenced that culture, and you wrote about, of course, the famous Blue and White and Hollywood Cafe, but you also uncovered a hidden culinary gem at Veda, with Veda, Aveda. And
yes.
Where exactly do you have to go to get this fine meal?
I went to prison. So I went to the county jail. Which all my friends thought was hilarious because actually I've never been to jail before. But so I had to go through security and went back to the cafeteria. And this woman was a soul food cook who had a restaurant that burned down. And at her age, she just decided she needed a little more stability. So she was offered this job at the county jail and took it. And while I'm setting up, she tells me, well, we used to serve pork chops, but somebody used the bone as a shiv, so we can't serve the pork chops anymore. But yeah, I got to go in the walk-in, and she makes banana pudding, from scratch. So I saw the bananas ripening and getting ready for that. And then she does a lot with the community. So a lot of the seniors come in and eat. So it's apparently the joke is that if you're going to get incarcerated, Tunica's the place to go. Best food.
So, Bowen Thigpen, you wrote an article about soul food. What did you learn about soul food?
So I grew up in Jackson, and I guess I I grew up on eating that kind of food, or so I thought. And so when we were going through stories to begin with, I said that story sounds really interesting just because I love to eat, just like down, Southern good cooked food. And so I got the story and didn't really have a whole lot of idea what I was going to do with it, but Bill gave me some suggestions of who to interview. And so I went to, I can't think of the town right now. Cleveland, sorry. And interviewed there's two soul food restaurants there. It's called the Senator's Place is one, and the Country Platter is another one. And both of them were really, really good, really, really good meals. But what I learned mostly about soul food is that it's predominantly an African American, or it has predominantly African American roots, but it's so much more than that. It's so much, really, with Delta food in general, it's so much more than just a meal, kind of like Susan and Bill were saying earlier, but it brings so many different kind of people together in a way that's really unlike anything else. And it was absolute phenomenal food, but that aside, like just the culture that's behind it, I guess, and the way it attracts so many different people, no matter race, education level, anything like that. I mean, I interviewed a guy that said he's seen lawyers and farmers and blue collar and white collar workers all sit down at the same table at the same time, just to enjoy a good meal. And that's exactly what it was. It was a really, really cool experience because it was something I hadn't seen, but I could have guessed existed, but it was really good to see firsthand and kind of write about that and how that worked.
Okay. In Marigold, which you also wrote about, you've got a world-renowned potter and a kind of a crazy restaurant. Tell us about a little bit about those and how they managed to keep Marigold going.
Yeah, when me and Bill were first driving through Marigold over spring break, he said, you want to see downtown? And I said, sure. And 60 seconds later, he said, oh, that was it. So there's not a lot there. But what was there was, like you said, this world-renowned potter, Lee McCarty, who owns McCarty's, and incredible pottery. And there's also a restaurant there called The Gallery. And so that and this place called Crawdads, which is unbelievable. Everyone should go.
Describe Crawdads.
Crawdads, I think I described it as a man cave mansion. It's unbelievable. It's all wood. It's a crawfish place, but they serve a lot of different things, just like an outdoors place. But on the walls are, deer. There's a lion in there or something. There's all kinds of animals' heads, things from Africa. It's just.
Where do they get them from?
A lot of people, their wives of the town go up to Westerfield. I'm sorry, I haven't looked at this in a while. And they say, hey, we want to get rid of these because our husbands bring them back and we don't want anything to do with them. So you have them and put them in your restaurant. So that's what they did. And so now their walls are just flooded with all these different animal heads. But it's to see like how two places like that can keep a town like that alive is pretty amazing. I had no idea. I had never even heard of Marigold before. And to see, I guess, like the effects of really two people and what they wanted to do with that town was pretty astounding.
Okay. Camille Mullins did 3 Q&As with Delta chef Wally Joe and Delta Magazine editor Melissa Townsend and former Viking cooking school instructor Catherine Heiskell. and Elizabeth High School,
Elizabeth
right?
High School.
Okay, I'm mixing up mothers and daughters. Tell us about how, what you learned about interviewing techniques, how to get things out of people in doing those Q&As, because the Q&As were hard to do.
Well, because all three were from the Delta originally, it wasn't too difficult to get them to chat with me. But one thing when you're interviewing is, especially if you're interviewing an interesting person, it's really easy to talk just as much as they're talking, you know, just have like a normal conversation. So I definitely sort of flexed the muscle in which I did not talk and would just let them go on, and then I would just try, and if they mentioned something that I thought they could elaborate on, I would say, oh, well, tell me more about that. But I don't know. I think the Q&As were not difficult at all. All three of the people felt really passionately about the Delta, you know, and food, obviously, you know, that's why we interviewed them. But I think I just learned a lot about, you know, how fun interviewing can be. I personally really enjoy interviewing because I enjoyed the aspect of learning about the people and, you know, what drives them and I really enjoyed having the experience to meet everyone because they were all very well accomplished, and I think they all went to Ole Miss. I know Melissa
was an
and Molly
advantage.
did Elizabeth go to Ole Miss?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so, yeah, I think that just how to, I don't know, the Q&As were pretty easy because I didn't have to transcribe and then sort of write a story essentially, because I could just translate exactly what they wanted to say, and I think what they wanted to say was really important when it comes to, you know, the future of the Delta and everything that's going on now.
When you went to Greenwood to do the story on the Chinese restaurant, My Little China, what did you find when you did your reporting?
What did I find? Well, I think that when I went in, I had no idea what to really expect. I just knew that the restaurant was unique in some way and that I should try and, you know, find out what that was. And I knew the food was really interesting. My Little China is a really interesting restaurant. You can read about it in the magazine, but it's this sort of Chinese buffet, but at night it transforms and they serve like a certain type of steak that's $100. And they serve all these, you know, escargot, all these really different things that you normally wouldn't find, I feel, in the Delta. You probably wouldn't find it in Oxford. And I ended up finding that it was a really sweet love story because he moved all the way here from Hong Kong just to be with her. And he moved to the Delta, which is a very different place than Hong Kong. So I thought that was really sweet.
Okay.
But before, want to definitely hear from Katie and Jared, who are responsible, two of the photographers, Thomas Granning also, for these amazing photos, which really helped tell the story. And I wondered if each of you, and maybe start with Katie, could just tell what was your favorite assignment, or that something you just stumbled upon, like rat maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, I loved it all because in the Delta you get a lot of free food, and that's truly the best part of this trip. And meeting people is second, but the free food was awesome. So I just kind of played cleanup photographer, and every assignment that wasn't taken I kind of ran to. And then we did meet interesting people like Rat, who was really bizarre. Like, we were the last people to interview him.
This was Frank Ratcliffe, longtime proprietor of the Riverside Hotel in Clarksdale, which has this deep history, and ended up interviewing him, turned out about a week or two before he passed away.
Yeah, that was super cool, but really depressing to find out. And we talked to his daughter as well, and she was really awesome as well. Just cool family history. He'd been in this building forever.
He said he would die before he'd give it up.
Yeah, it was.
Bessie Smith died there. It had
right,
been
and they have like a room in memorial of Bessie Smith.
It had been a hotel that only when blacks couldn't go.
Well, it was a hospital, I think.
Sorry, a hospital. Yeah.
So they have this room that's just like her room that she supposedly died in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, this was super fun project, and my only regret is that I didn't do it every year.
Yeah.
So you should definitely sign up for it if you get a chance.
Yeah. Jared, what about, Jared did more of the portraits and capturing these people, and I love these natural portraits that you got. Tell us about just your approach to this project and what you got out of it.
Well, on the side, to actually try and make some money, I do portrait photography for families and weddings and such. So when I approach a journalism story and there's people involved and we need a photo of the person, I do like to set up portraits and not action shots whenever we're doing interviews and stuff like that. But the best part about going to the Delta this year and last year going down the Mississippi River working for the same magazine project, the people are just so open to set up and have their picture made, and it's very natural. You're not having to pose them or anything like that. They're just they sit up and they're ready to have their picture made. And the beautiful country and the buildings and the restaurants. So a photographer's best friend is just beautiful stuff to take pictures of.
Yeah, that's great.
And Virginia England, we did not forget you. Virginia was the lead designer in the design class that designed the magazine. And I got to tell you, this is a new experience for me, and getting it designed this way, and I was terrified. But then Virginia would come back every couple of weeks, and she'd have all these beautifully designed pages that that she and others in the class did. What was that experience like, designing a magazine from scratch?
It was really fun. I mean, as a class, we picked out the color scheme and all the fonts, and that part was really fun because we were inspired by the photos and the content. But toward the end, I did a lot of the editing, and so brought the magazine together and went through and edited all the pages, the design of it. And that part was really meticulous. And there were plenty of times I thought we were completely done, but then I would take it to Darren Sinefsky, who was the professor kind of in charge of the design. Be like, no, this, and this is all wrong. And so it was definitely learning a lot from my mistakes as a designer. And it was really fun. And now we're working on a tablet version. And so that's new for me too. And so just learning a lot about editing design.
Great. I want to get back to one thing before we leave, because I want you to know how good the writing was and how entertaining it could be. This is from just one story in the magazine, and it's talking about that hospitality culture in the Delta. And this was the lead of the story. There's a man, a legend really, named Lewis Watson, who liked to jump out of airplanes. So much so that whenever he and his wife were invited to a party, the hostess knew to find a wide open space outside to place their martinis. And sure enough, as guests mixed and mingled with cheese straws and glasses in hand, the Watsons would float down from the sky, landing squarely in front of their cocktails. The tussle-haired guests would raise their glasses, toast their audience, and join the festivities as if they just walked through the front door. Now you tell me that the Delta is not different. You just don't see that every day. This is why we enjoyed this so much. I think I neglected to mention that we do this class, we do the reporting in this class, the bulk of it, every year on spring break. So these students, gave the ultimate sacrifice. They gave up their spring break. They camped out in the top of Bill Luckett, Morgan Freeman's Ground Zero, which is a hopping place, I'm going to tell you. But fortunately, they cut out the lights at what time, Bill?
During the week at 11.
Yeah.
Weekends about 2.
We were grateful because we were there during the week. We were grateful when it went off. And it was sometimes kind of hard to get the students out of Ground Zero and some of the other great eating places and partying places in Clarksdale, but they were troopers. And I think we owe them a hand.